I was looking at the ratings of all the episodes and I noticed that this episode in particular, called Lullaby, was actually rated as the worst episode of the entire show. And to really understand why people hated this one specifically as much as they did, you need to look at this from their perspective as this episode was coming out. Because this episode was set in the middle of the second season, and that is not a good thing, because all the problems that people complain about when it comes to From have never ever been worse than they were in season 2. And the reason for this is because we were coming out of an incredible first season, and the main thing about season 1 is that the people of the town were continuously sharing information with each other and always working together to find a way out of Fromland. And the best example of this is Jim, Jade, and everyone else coming together to build the radio. And we saw literally the entire town working together for that goal. And what they were doing made perfect sense and also totally satisfied the desire that most of us now have to see these people doing their best and making an effort to escape and find answers. And we also had so many different moments that had a similar type of feeling, like Donna telling Tabitha everything that she knows about the monsters, and Victor especially was always sharing information in season 1 with the people, but they were the ones who did not want to listen to him. He tells Donna the missing peaches were a bad sign. He starts digging the graves and tells them that bad things were going to happen, and he showed both Julie and Ethan the faraway trees and talks about the forest itself moving closer to the town once again, all of which he believed was a bad sign. And of course we had Boyd going out, finding livestock, finding the talismans, and of course sharing that information with the people of the town. And so the writers of the show built up this expectation in the viewers that the characters would keep sharing information and doing projects together, just like building the radio. And so with this episode called Lullaby, which once again was the worst rated in the entire show, this was when people had enough of the lack of answers or really any progression in the biggest questions raised by the series at this point of the story, like who was that old man in the dungeon? Why doesn't Boyd ask Victor if he knows that old man from the dungeon? Why isn't Boyd trying to go back to the lighthouse or sending someone to find it? Who was the voice on the radio? Why don't Tabitha and Victor tell the people about the monsters living in the tunnels? Why don't they tell them about the cave drawings? On and on and on and on. There were simply way too many questions and barely any attempt being made by the people of this town to find answers. Apart from Jade and Jim Matthews, it seemed like none of these people were really making any effort to cooperate with the others to find answers. Jade, of course, made a deal with Victor to play him the violin in exchange for Victor telling him everything he knew about the symbol. And of course, Jade eventually realized that Victor actually scammed him, which is why he was pushing him around later on in the season. And with Jim Matthews, Donna completely refused to help him investigate the voice on the radio, and when he approached Boyd asking him for help and sharing information, this is what Boyd says to him in return.
We heard a voice on the radio, me and Donna, and whoever it was, he knew my name, knew what my wife was doing in the house, in the basement of our house. Look, we don't have to trust each other, we don't even have to like each other, but we've got to start working together on this.
I gotta go, Jim.
And I feel like this scene right here is a perfect representation of everything that was wrong with season 2 and why this episode specifically was the lowest rated in the entire show. It exemplified everything that people completely despise about season 2. It was the characters continuously refusing to share information despite the content of what they had to share being easily proven just by using simple logic. A good example of what I mean is Tabitha and Victor not telling everyone in the town about where the monsters sleep. They didn't tell them about the monsters seemingly taking souvenirs from the townspeople, and they did not tell them about the monsters seemingly being intelligent enough to draw an entire mural down in the tunnels. And of course, Boyd never wonders not even for a single moment, about the purpose of the lighthouse, who built it, are the people who built it still alive, normal things that anybody in this situation would be thinking about and asking. Boyd never asks any of those questions at all. It was a season filled with a bunch of characters doing things or not doing things that did not make sense from any logical point of view. And this episode was the compounding of all the worst things about the show: the refusal to share information that's easily proven and not subjective based on perception, the refusal to work together for a common goal despite it being the obvious and logical thing to do, and the writer's refusal to expand upon the meaning of the cliffhangers of the first season in any real meaningful way. We still didn't know who was on the radio, how they were being spied on. We still did not know what the lighthouse was, and Boyd was showing no interest in finding out. And of course, Boyd wasn't even interested in finding out who Martin was, because once again, he did not ask Victor if he knew a guy fitting his profile. And it's all of this stuff combined that ended up making this episode the worst of the entire show. But that was before Season 3, Episode 7, which has now officially taken the throne and become the worst rated episode of all the seasons of From. And this is the same episode where Fatima killed Tilly. Coincidence? I think not. But I'm actually genuinely surprised at this rating. But I guess it's the same story it's always been. The writers not focusing on what people actually want to see. Basically, just give more screen time to the monsters, give us more answers about questions that have already been raised rather than new mysteries, and of course have more of the characters be looking for the answers to begin with. And definitely have way less scenes like this one, where Kenny was basically saying to the cop, don't look for answers, just give up, there's no point, blah blah blah. Nobody wants to hear that, Kenny, trust me. This is now the worst rated episode of the show. Trust me, Kenny, nobody wants to hear you saying that. Nobody.